Talk Speedway. Talk Speedway.
Hello and welcome to Talk Speedway's feature podcast, and this week joining us is Team GB fitness coach Paul Suggitt. I hope I'm saying that right, Paul.
Yeah, perfect, mate. Yep, no problem.
Joining us, of course, is Griff. This is an interesting kind of topic for us to get onto, because I'm sure as a guy who's went to Speedway from yesteryear, fitness wasn't exactly high on the list of priorities then, was it?
No, I don't suppose it was, Scott. I think we're both hoping to learn a few things tonight. But what I will say is, when you're talking about the Speedway from the, 60s, 70s and 80s, it's strange. If you look at the photos of the guys who were there on the top of the rostrum, there was no tubby ones, was there?
Not really. So, Paul, I guess when you come to you and say, what's your involvement here? We know you're obviously involved with the Team GB squad, but how did you first get involved with the guys?
But basically, I've been personal training for about nearly 15 years now, and I was just working in my gym, my place of work, and I got a message from Ollie Alun, who I'm sure you know.
Yep.
Just come up to us and basically introduced himself and said, "I've seen you working with some people. I like what you do, and can you help me?" And it kind of started from there. I knew what Speedway was. My dad's a very big bike fan, but it's more sort of on the TT and the circuit stuff. I haven't really ever had a link to Speedway.
Yep.
And it wasn't until that I thought, right, okay, I've got a professional athlete here, let's do a bit of research. And then I just watched about 3 months worth of Speedway, just researching it, watching the videos and trying to familiarise myself with it as much as possible to give Ollie the best training I could. And it started from there. So I just started training Ollie, and it was working. Results started to show as well, and got good feedback from him. And from that, Ollie then retired, and a few years later, I just happened to bump into him in home base of all places, and he came up to us with a new idea that one of his old sponsors, Ed Bowes at Poltech, was starting up an engineering apprenticeship, and from there, he basically was taking all of the younger school leavers as such, and some of the younger riders, like someone who's riding in the Colts or coming through the ranks, and basically set up a Speedway program where the young lads would learn the engineering side of how to obviously look after their bikes and obviously get their NVQ or whatever qualification it was out of the end of it. But also, obviously, on part of that, they'd learn about the fitness and nutrition. So Ollie drafted me in to do that that side of the stuff, and we started working with the lads once a month. And then the actual Team GB got in touch and said, "Look, we like what you're doing. Let's get involved." So it's kind of gone from one strength to another, really. But yeah, that's kind of the background.
Paul, you talked about watching Speedway and familiarising yourself with the sport itself. How do you sort of pitch a training and nutrition program for a specific sport? Is that something that you take on board? Actually, what they do in terms of on the track?
Absolutely. Like this is what makes a difference between like sort of some trainers as well, because there's no point in telling a tennis player to run marathons.
Yeah.
It has to be completely specific to the sport. So I'm not new to the job. I've been doing it a good few years, and without sounding sort of big head, I do consider myself to be quite thorough in the job. And basically, all I would instantly do is watching some of the lower level Speedway. So watching what the lads are doing on the bikes, what they're trying to achieve. And obviously sometimes it doesn't happen and you get quite a few spills and mistakes and stuff like that. So I was instantly watching that to start with. And then I completely reversed it in watching some of the GP stuff of 2014. So I suppose when it was with Ollie, it was before then. I was watching some of the top level stuff before then. And what I instantly pick up on is I'm looking at body actions. I'm looking at smoothness, and things where someone's relaxed. When Usain Bolt runs 100, I know he's a bit of a rare breed, really, but when he runs, he's so relaxed.
Yes.
And you can see the other lineup of the races now. Obviously, there's not much difference in time on 100 meters, but that little gap is actually like a century. So the other runners are really stiff trying to catch up with him, and it's the same for Speedway. I'm looking at the guys that go around the corner with a nice smooth action, and then you've got some guys who are just really fighting the bike, and they're throwing it around and not really gaining anything from it. So I'm just looking at basically core strength. I'm looking at how flexible their body is, and trying to basically make the bike an extension of their body, so it all works as one. And then basically, as soon as I know which muscles are involved, and basically just looking at it, and as soon as I know which muscles are involved, I'll instantly know what exercises to do to target it, basically.
Paul, do you actually think it worked to your advantage? The fact that you perhaps didn't have that much an interest in Speedway before you started working with some of the riders, maybe perhaps a blank canvas to work with, and you didn't have any preconceived ideas about what kind of fitness they actually needed?
Yeah, possibly. Like I said, I'm quite committed. Like, football's sort of my background, and I can put together a training plan for football, like, off the top of my head, no problem. But with this, I did have to, like you said, like, research it and stuff. And I guess with being a blank canvas, I don't have any bad habits to fall back on. I don't have, it is like just a child's view. You get a nice, pure, simple thought, and then you have to build on it. I suppose just if anything, it's just having to do my homework, really. I don't have, I suppose in a way there's sort of pros and cons to it. I don't have any experience on riding and any experience on that side of thing, which obviously doesn't help me. But on the other side, I've got, like you said, no bad habits or misconceptions of what I think is right. So I don't have anything to go back on. It's just basically, right, this is it. And then we see how the training goes when we work with the lads, and everything's been positive. So that's been good.
It's an interesting concept, really, when you think about it. I mean, I like the analogy in the Usain Bolt, but the one thing about Speedway, of course, is there's a machine in the mix as well as the athlete, isn't there?
Well, that's what been one of the biggest things of people say, oh, how can you call them an athlete? They're sitting on an engine, and I'm like, that's such an old-fashioned thing to say, because I'll leave my mates. I'm 5'8", and I weigh about 10.5 stone. Which apparently is ideal for Speedway.
That's just the same as Paul, to be honest.
Well, that's it. Well, Doyle says, he goes, you've got to get on a bike because you'd be rapid. But I think I'd probably end up in the wall in the first corner. But there we go. But it's like, I'll leave the lads standing at go-karting, like on the straights, just because I'm so much lighter. And that's such an important thing. Like, and I don't think that hasn't had an effect. Say, for example, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I know obviously the bikes are all different and the clothing and all different, everything like that, but the fitness wasn't there. And it is now such an important aspect. The lighter you are, the faster you go.
Paul, that's a question that I've got written down about the power to weight ratio. The riders are striving, aren't they, for to be lighter. But obviously, what you said there about the 10 stone mark or the 10.5 stone mark, is there a danger that riders can actually go too far with regards to trying to lose weight? What's the thinking? What's the science behind it from the fitness point of view?
Well, everything I always do, generally riders don't tend to have different body types. So basically, without going too much into it, there's 3 kind of body types. And you can imagine an I, which is sort of stick thin, a V, which is sort of wide shoulders, narrow hips, like typically athletic, and then O, which is sort of high percent muscle, high percent fat, like a shot putter. Generally, most Speedway riders are the I, stick thin, marathon runner kind of frame. However, some of them aren't.
Yeah.
And you have to look at each rider individually to see what muscle type or body type they've got, and then know what to work with. Because some lads, I'm striving to get my athletes down to about 7.4% body fat for the season.
Okay.
Which is pretty lean. Now, if you go too low, some of them will get really susceptible to colds, being run down, low energy, just purely because their particular body isn't meant to run that light.
Sure.
Obviously, we've got a big factor here, like so many variables. They're going in 3 or 4 countries every single week, lots of flying, lack of sleep, lots of traveling. The nutrition can go out the window, and we run on fuel, just like their bikes run on the fuel. We need to run on fuel, and if that's not right, then obviously we won't work as 100% best. But
sure,
generally, I can see, like, a lot of people are saying how Jason looks. You know, obviously he's world champion. He's been brilliant. A lot of people are saying how he's looking a bit thin. He is absolutely bang on, 100% fit on the nose, because we've got it just right.
Right.
And I've never known someone so committed and hard working as Jace. You can see that just from the fact is he's been riding all year with a broken foot. So, yes, you can be too light and too thin, and a lot of them try and strive to get down light because they're comparing themselves to other riders. But other riders might have a different body shape, a different height, so therefore they are going to be lighter. So they just need to focus on themselves and just see what their optimum best is, and that's where the training comes in.
That's very interesting, that, Paul, because I've heard riders mention in the past, and you've seen riders, Scott, Rooney Halter and Rowan Tungate, both quite small fellas. And, you know, I've heard Craig Cook, there isn't an ounce of fat on Craig Cook, saying, you know, on the fast tracks when they're absolutely dialed in, those type of riders, I can't get near them. I think what Paul's saying there is quite interesting. And if you haven't got a science behind you or expert advice in terms of your nutrition and your diet, some riders might be chasing the impossible, mightn't they? And I think that's a potential worry if riders aren't getting the right advice. Paul, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone has a knowledge of what they think is right, and I think a lot of the riders do know their stuff on certain things. But from the experience of working with the GB lads and with the others, there is work to be done. I let them do the riding and the bike craft and stuff like that, because that's why they are. Well, some of the Niels, Everson and Doyle are some of the best riders in the world, because they're not there by choice, by chance. They're there because they're bloody good at what they do. But there's still work to be done on a lot of the nutrition, which is a minefield.
Well, that's actually something I wanted to bring up with Paul. In a former life, when me and Griff had spoke to Ty Whiffenden, this was the year he became world champion, and I think that was 2013, his first world title. The biggest thing for Ty at that time was he was speaking about nutrition. He says he said at that point that is the hardest thing. Like when travelling in vans, airports, blah blah blah. The hardest thing is to get the proper foods that you're actually needing at that point inside you. Do you find that like a constant battle with the guys you look after? Is the nutrition side of it rather than the fitness side of it?
To be honest, I'm pretty black and white. I'll tell them to do something, I expect them to do it. And going back a few years, I think it was a little bit more of a struggle. It's not convenient. But you're professional racing drivers, so why can't you get it sorted and get it organised? Yeah, I appreciate that you're travelling around different places and stuff like that, but you organise it and prepare yourself. So, especially with like hotels, well, not necessarily hotels, but like especially like foreign, you haven't got the luxury of what the foods are and what's good. But everything's come on so much now. Like going over to Poland, I've been to Poland a few times now, and there's good food around there now that's quite well built up, and there's always something that you can get that's half decent. It's just whether the riders have the knowledge of what to have and when, so they can still eat good food but eat at the wrong time, which can be just as bad, or stopping the cravings for having bad stuff. Especially if you're at the top of your game and you're winning GPs, you're going to go out and celebrate and have a little something, where you can't allow that to happen. because other riders aren't allowing that to happen. So you got to do what Jace does and just celebrate at the end of the year. So yeah, it is tricky, but it's not as tricky as what people make out. With a good base, some good solid nutrition advice behind you, it's definitely doable.
Paul, you mentioned when you get involved with Ollie Allen. I think it's actually unbelievable that probably 2015 is when kind of Team GB is that. It kind of started to kind of evolve, bring these things on board in training camps, etc. All that seemed to change around about that time. I don't know if you were involved around about 2015.
Yep. That's when I first started.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Team GB manager Alun Rossiter now, because as I say, he had some complimentary things to say about you and how all of this has evolved.
Talk Speedway.
Alun, you've involved now fitness coach Paul Suggitt into the fold in Team GB. What does he bring to the party? What does he add to the team?
I think what you find about him, he's not frightened to tell them, and if somebody's not pulling their weight or somebody's not doing something, no matter whether you're Craig Cook or whether you're whoever, do you know what I mean? Danny King or Chris Harris or whoever, he's not frightened to tell you. And I think you need that, for somebody to say, well, you're not doing it, and this, and he'll tell you. There's no hairs or graces about it, and we've had this argument for years about the fitness and the nutrition. We've been doing it now this is coming up this will be next year, will be our third year that we've been doing it. In fairness, the beginning of last year, we really got into it heavily. But this is, getting into it, like the fitness and the nutrition. We've been doing it a little while now, so it's nothing new. There's lots of stories going out there that we haven't done it, but I said it started off in 2015 when we went to Croatia, and then we kind of moved it on, and this winter we'll move it on to another level as well.
Alun, do you feel as if there's a difference in the rider's attitude with someone like Paul on board with the team?
Oh, definitely, because when we had the meeting at the start of the year, we had the squad and we brought a few of the youngsters in, Dan Bewley, Parkinson Smith, and people like that. We went to Kings Lynn, had a meeting with the riders, discussed things, and it was they were all keen. They're the ones that moved the goalposts.
Talk Speedway.
Always great to hear from Roscoe there, Paul. He was very complimentary about you there. But as he says in the interview there's some things that they're planning on improving on this year again. From your point of view, how does that fit in with yourself?
So basically, I speak to Roscoe quite a lot, quite closely, because there's a lot of stuff that actually goes on behind the scenes when the season finishes. It's probably when we become our busiest, really. But like what we've done is I've actually just set up a new business called Action Sport Performance, which is sort of elite level training, like what we've been doing. And I've brought in a guy called Chris Neville, who's a very good sports conditioning expert. His background is in football. He's actually been involved with the England team, Blackburn, Swindon. But he's got a love for Speedway. The passion is there, and he often goes down to Swindon. So I pulled Chris along. He started following me on Twitter. I think just because of his fan of it and just loves it. We actually got talking, and I've brought him on board. So what he brings to the table is just a whole wealth of experience and contacts as well, just for getting better equipment, different contracts with supplement companies, or just training software and stuff like that, which has been brilliant. So what Roscoe's touching on is the fact that me and Chris now are basically looking at working with the GB boys and the GB team, and basically just going the extra level deeper into the training. So we'd have hydration testing in the morning, hydration testing just before they ride, so making sure that this would come from their urine sample. We just find out exactly how hydrated they are. Obviously, if you're slightly dehydrated, your concentration level is lower, and that's very important when you come to the tapes. You know how important it is to get to the first corner first. we're looking at doing different other testing, so much higher level than what we've been doing before, just because we've been probably restricted with costs a little bit, because it is I suppose the British Speedway is as good as it's going at the moment, and improving. It is very, very slow on the uptake, shall we say. It's probably 10 years too late, really. So
that's
yeah,
kind of what I was getting at with the 2015 thing. I mean, it's a wee bit kind of unbelievable that it's managed to get to 2015. I mean, what you're talking about here is what kind of is you, to put your words to it, elite level athletes have been doing for decades. And we're talking about our best athletes catching up in 2015. It's a bit of a disadvantage, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I did actually, Ollie introduced me to the England team, and I went and saw them over at Kings Lynn when Rob Lyon was in charge. And Rob bought into the idea and said, "Look, we want you on board. This would be brilliant for the lads. It's a good time, and I'm ready to go." But it just didn't get signed off. So it was seen at the time as it doesn't need it. It's, we don't need to do that, and it was just quite an old-fashioned view. And I'm just wishing, this is 2007, just where we'd be now if we were able to start then. But it swings and roundabouts, and it's all come round again. So we're just a little bit behind the times, but I'm pretty confident that no one in the world is going to get the training that we're about to give. So basically, just watch your space to see what we can do. So it's quite an exciting time. So
fascinating stuff, Paul. Absolutely fascinating. It's a real eye opener for everybody that's going to be listening to this podcast, I imagine, because I'm not so sure that everybody realizes the commitment that riders have to make in terms of diet, nutrition, etc., and living on the road. It's not an easy life for them, is it?
No, that's right. It is tough, and I think they get a bit of a hard time as well. I think one thing I've come to understand, obviously being quite heavily involved with Twitter and the social media side of things, is the fans of Speedway are quite mixed. I think as you got some of the youngsters coming in, but I think that the following for youngsters in Speedway needs to double, quadruple. I don't think there's enough young fans in there. It's quite an older fan base, and that's a good thing as well. But it does show quite an old-fashioned view of what they think that riders need to do. And I think people listening to this, I'll probably get a bit of a backlash. We don't need it, that kind of stuff. But you do. It does make all that difference. Just talking about the hydration side, 1% dehydration affects your performance by 10%. That is huge. That is absolutely huge. We've all had a meal and have eaten too much and feel really tired afterwards. If you're eating at the wrong time, your Christmas meal, what do you do afterwards? You go to sleep because your body just can't. All your energy's gone to digesting your food. And without being too, sort of rough around it, but you burp, you fart, and stuff like that. They're all signs to something's not right. You don't just live with it. If your body's producing gas or something like that, there's a reason why, and it's just not. You're eating something that's just not quite right for you, so therefore your body's not quite ticking over right. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't buy a Ferrari and then go and fill it with supermarket fuel. So. Oh,
I would.
Well, yeah, you could do, but you wouldn't get the performance out of it. So. But they look at what Speedway guys do to their bikes now.
Yeah.
They're going out and spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds on something that's going to shave a few grams off the weight to getting them right down on the nose, but they could drop half a stone off. Which is 4, 5, 6, 7 kilos, which would make much more difference. So if they put that effort, what they put into their bikes, into their nutrition and their training, they would just excel themselves so much further. And that's what we're trying to get across. And I think I've been working with Stevie Worrell for 2 years now. And you can see how he's developed over these last couple of years. He's absolutely flying. Mm-hmm. And we're still working with him. he's so committed and he's so easy to work with because he listens and he appreciates what we're talking about. And he buys into it and he goes, right, okay, yeah. And we're making these little adjustments, and you can see with his riding just how well he's doing. And he's probably one of the hot prospects for Team GB next year.
Paul, it's just as Griff said, it is fascinating, the whole thing. Just to let the fans kind of into you, who is it you kind of look after, and what's your plans for this winter? I know you've got a camp coming up, and I think it's early December.
Yeah, that's right. So the Action Sport Performance is the new sort of brand that me and Chris have put forward for training, motorsport training, so into the Speedway riders. This is completely private and not linked to GB, so anybody can sign up for it, foreign or whatever, because obviously there's quite a foreign few riders that live in the country.
Well, especially around about you, because you'll have like Everson and Kenneth Beer and stuff around about you as well.
Yeah, that's it. So and you've got Peterborough is Everson and Danny King, and you got a few in Norfolk as well. Robert Lambert is up in North Norfolk, Louis Kerr, and like I said, Kenneth Bier, obviously Jason Doyle in Norwich. I'd say probably some of the top level boys probably wouldn't train on a camp. They'd probably work with us individually, just for the exclusivity and the privacy of it. But the actual camp is 1st to 3rd of December. And we've got a few riders signed up now. We've still got a few spaces to fill. So it is still open. And it's basically that high level stuff that we've been talking about. And it's an off-season training camp. So this one is the off-season. After January will be the pre-season camp, and then there'll be a second pre-season camp. But the good thing about it is we do all your testing. We find out exactly where you are now. There is group training and you're working with other riders, but it's all completely specific to you.
Yep.
So we train that person, we test them, and then we test them again. And we give them stuff to work with over the winter period, where normally I would probably say over 50% of the riders aren't doing much up until January time. If we're making that start, ahead. So that's the camp side. So that's like a group training camp that we're looking to do 3 times before the season starts, where riders can come on board and get some elite level training. And because it's a group, obviously you're saving quite a bit of money, so actually getting it for quite a good price, because we're working together. But with regards to the one-to-one stuff, like I said, worked with Ollie Allen, and then started working with the Team GB. A lot of the riders contacted me individually. So Stevie Worrell would come down from Hull to Norwich for a few hours and then drive back again. But that would take care of everything: his schedule, his training plan, his off-season, pre-season, nutrition, and give him all the information he needs. I've worked with obviously Jason Doyle and Niels Christian Everson. Unlucky Niels didn't have the best season this year. I think he's quite unlucky. Danny King, worked with Danny. I've helped Cookie a little bit over the phone and just by email, but it's only now, I think it's next Thursday, I'm now starting to work with Craig, ready for the GP.
Excellent.
So yeah, I'll be working with Craig quite a lot, working closely with Craig, because obviously we've got Ty in there as well, but Ty's very sort of reserved. He likes doing his own thing. So it'd be really good to work with Craig, and he's completely the underdog, and some people have written him off and stuff, and it'd be interesting just to see what we can do. And if I can get him in the optimum performance, at least there's nothing he can say, well, I was up against better riders. But if there's, Wushman nutrition or my training was better, that's not good. We need to be going in 100% ready and just wind him up and let him go and just see what he can do, because we know the racing ability that he has got, and the grip between his teeth. He's quite lively. So that would be good to see what he can do. And just working with Nikolai Clint as well. He was coming over from Wolverhampton. So there's quite a few riders, really. You're
a busy man,
I
Paul.
have missed out a few there, but
that's okay. You say you're active on Twitter as well. Where can we find you on there? And also, is there a Twitter for your Action Sport Performance?
So the Action Sport Performance is run through my other one at the moment. That will be up and running basically after this first camp, which is like a trial really.
Mm-hmm.
See how it all goes. But it's Suggs PT, SUGGS PT is the handle. Or if you can just type in my name. Mm-hmm. The business is PSPT, which is Paul Suggitt Personal Training. So I can be found on there, and that's probably the best way. If any of the riders are listening that are thinking about getting involved in the camp, we've got all the information, so they can contact me on Twitter. And we've also got Chris Neville as well, which is CNev1.
Paul, again, this, as Griff said, this has been an absolute fascinating chat. We're absolutely delighted to have you on and kind of explain to us. Probably we were a wee bit kind of naive to the fact, the amount of work you actually do behind the scenes. And again, as Griff said, the amount that the riders have got to essentially sacrifice to get to the top level as well. It's been an excellent insight.
Scott, I'm sold. If I was a young or not even such a young speedway rider, I'd be on the phone like a shot to get that kind of advice. You've got to speak to the experts in each expert field, haven't you?
Exactly.
Well, that's it. It's just looking. We want to look at. We want to help the elites as well, obviously, top level. But we want to work with the younger lads as well, because we want to see. Let's get a 3-year plan and see if we can put them into the GP, get them into the Britain team. So you're taking like the likes of Dan Bewley, Carl Bickley, the young lads that are now starting to come through, starting to do well. If we can give them that step up that maybe some of the elite riders didn't know back then.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be given, like, people think, oh no, I'm not elite, I'm not an elite rider. That's rubbish. We want to take the youngsters as well and give them the step up and the absolute professional training. So they're like 3 or 4 years ahead of everyone else, and let's see what they can do then. So.
Brilliant. As I say, thanks, Paul. That's been an absolutely fantastic chat. Don't forget, you can contact Talk Speedway on social media at Talk Speedway on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook at Talk Speedway Podcast, and that's the same on Instagram as well. If you'd like to leave us a voice message, you can do so by calling the 0141 628 7124 number, and we can play your voicemail out live on Talk Speedway Podcast. As I say, Griff, that's it for this show, and Paul, again, thanks very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
To everyone out there, thank you, and we'll catch you next time.